If I surveyed every Christian in the world and asked them this one simple question, which of the 10 commandments do you tend to neglect the most? What do you think would be the most popular, most common response? I would venture to wager that if we're honest, the command to keep the Sabbath is probably at the top of most people's list. For whatever reason, as history has unfolded from the giving of the command at Sinai, through Jesus, through the formation of the early church, and through the rest of the history of Christianity up to today, keeping the Sabbath at best has faded to the background, if not just been completely lost from our faith and practice altogether. All that seems to remain for most Christians is just their simple attendance at a church service on the weekends, and that about makes up their observance of Sabbath. But that's a far cry from the beautiful and profound practice of Sabbath keeping that was commanded of Israel in the Ten Commandments. So what's the reason for this neglect? Why out of all the 10 commandments in the Decalogue is this one about Sabbath keeping so frequently written off or ignored altogether, or just considered irrelevant or unnecessary for our lives today? I think part of the problem is that we don't really have a good grasp on just how profound and significant the command was from its inception for the ancient Israelites from the very beginning. When you dig into the relevant scriptures pertaining to the Sabbath and the scholarly work that's been done in studying the Sabbath and studying those scriptures, you quickly start to realize there are so many layers of meaning and significance packed into this practice. This was not some arbitrary law that God included in the 10 Commandments for no reason. Like all the rest of the commands, and especially like those first few in the Decalogue, the command to keep the Sabbath was absolutely crucial in forming Israel as God's distinct people. And so here are just some of the layers you'll start to uncover as you dive into the command and as you dive into the practice that carried on throughout Israel's history. This is not an exhaustive list, but as you can see, it is a long one, and I'm not going to read each one for the sake of time. But there are so many nuances to this command that we don't pay attention to, or at least for most of us, we just don't even realize are there in the text of Scripture, in the history of Israel's practice of this command. There are a lot of nuances to this practice of keeping the Sabbath. Obviously, I can't unpack all of those in this short video, but there are two aspects that I would think are worth highlighting, worth looking into at the very least, that will give us a better idea of why this practice was so foundational to the identity of ancient Israel. First is the Sabbath's connection to creation. When the command to remember the Sabbath is first given in Exodus 20, when it's first codified into law in the Decalogue, the explicit motivation that is given is the origin of this practice in Genesis 1. Before the nation of Israel ever even existed, the Sabbath was observed. And it was by God himself at the culmination of his creative endeavor. After 6 days of ordering and filling the cosmos, God rested on the seventh day, blessed it, and made it holy. God instituted into the very fabric of creation a rhythm of work and rest. He ordered and filled the created space with light and land and living beings, and he ordered and filled the created time with work and rest, rhythms and balances. The seventh day marked the completion of God's creative work and his settling into his finished creation to dwell and rule like a king settling into his kingdom. There's something fundamental about the Sabbath's connection to the way God ordered time in the cosmos and the way he himself stepped into that time to rule and reign with his human partners. Israel was commanded to observe this ritual in remembrance of the very order of the world and in participation with God in settling into and enjoying the fruit of their labor. The second aspect is the Sabbath's connection to liberation. An implicit motivation for keeping the Sabbath is given for all of the 10 Commandments at the start of Exodus 20, but it's made explicit in the reiteration of the Decalogue in Deuteronomy 5 when the Sabbath command is listed again. Israel is to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy because God had delivered them from oppressive slavery in Egypt. There is something irreplaceable about the Sabbath in its ability to bring to mind the reality that Israel is a redeemed people, no longer under the ruthless and oppressive regime of the Pharaoh. They were no longer to be exploited and treated as mere commodities to the human desire for production and consumption. They have been liberated, and the Sabbath ensures that they all, even the slaves, even the foreigners, even the animals in the land itself, would get to remember and enjoy that liberation. These two aspects of the Sabbath command hopefully highlight for you the deep significance of that practice for ancient Israel. It was not an arbitrary ritual that they upheld. The observance of Sabbath keeping was foundational to Israel's identity and instrumental to the ordering of their society. As they set apart this day each week, they set themselves apart as the holy people of God. And while the New Testament authors and Jesus himself are pretty clear that simple observance of Sabbath keeping as a ritual is not a requirement for inclusion into the people of God, we would still do well to reflect more on this ancient practice and see if there are ways we can incorporate it into our families and our communities, given just the depth and profound treasure that it seems to be from the very beginning. Might there still be some profound wisdom to be gained from this multifaceted jewel that is the Sabbath? Yes, it would disrupt our calendars and our routines. Yes, it would cause us to reevaluate our priorities and our habits. Yes, it would cause us to slow down the pace of our lives. Yes, it would go against all of our Western industrialized mentality for deifying production and consumption and efficiency. Yes, it would be completely foreign to the surrounding culture and probably set us apart and make us stand out from the society around us. But isn't that kind of the point?